Welcome everyone. My name is Tanya Shirazi Galvez. I'm a second year BMI PhD fiction fellow here at UNLV. I want to begin by thanking BMI donors Miriam Shearing, Beverly Rogers, the Rogers Foundation, and the College of Liberal Arts here at UNLV. Thanks so much for coming out tonight for a reading by Tyriek White. Thank you for the applause. This reading is a part of BMI's Breakout Writer Series, which is co-curated with students from the Creative Writing Program. So thanks, MFA students, for bringing amazing talent like Tyriek up here. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones. After the reading, Tyriek will take a few questions from the audience and then be available to sign copies of his book, We Are a Haunting. You can pick up a copy from the writer's block table in the lobby, which is also where the signing will take place. Please consider joining BMI for other upcoming events this fall, including Meg Bernhardt's reading on November 1st and Art Walk on Friday, November 3rd. Complete details on BMI's upcoming events are at blackmountaininstitute.org. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas wishes to acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities of this region and recognize that the university is situated on the traditional homelands of the Nuwu Southern Paiute people. We offer gratitude for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to study, learn, work, and be in community with this land. We encourage everyone in this space to engage in continued learning about the indigenous people who work and live on this land since time immemorial, including the Las Vegas Paiute tribe and the Moapa band of Paiutes. Tyriek White is a writer, musician, and educator from Brooklyn, New York. He is the author of We Are a Haunting, which was longlisted for the Center for Fiction first novel in the Brooklyn Public Library Book Prize. He has received fellowships from Callaloo and the New York State Writers Institute, among other honors. He is currently the media director of Lampblack Literary Foundation, which seeks to provide aid and resources to Black writers across the diaspora. He holds a degree in creative writing and Africana studies from Pitzer College and an MFA from the University of Mississippi. When I read We Are a Haunting, I was immediately pulled into the world of Key and Collie, their New York, their Brooklyn, their community, their family. I was struck by the line, "Are love and sacrifice not the dark synonyms for one another?" This is a theme that we return to in the novel. It manifests as a propulsive undercurrent of this family saga. There is such a close attention to studying, to the neighborhood. Brooklyn itself is alive on the page, where we witness intimate moments amongst our characters. The apartment complex feels so alive, with the conflicted people that live in between, where there's a lot of love and also pain. There's such a close attention to the emotional register and space. The prose is hypnotizing and unflinching. Haunting is what we return to, what returns to us. It also means preserving stories. It also means connection. It means reckoning. When white protagonists can speak to the dead, the individual and communal grieving of lost people and lost places manifests into hypnotic, vulnerable, and lyrical passages, and that's what remains. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Tyriek White.
Thank you, Tanya, for some amazing words, your engagement with the text. Thank you to MFA students and faculty who got me here. Thank you to Black Mountain, of course. What's good? What's good with y'all? Are we good? Y'all all right? Good. So I just want to read a passage And again, this book is mainly concerned with this family from this community, um, specifically in Brooklyn, New York, but um, like they say, a lot of hoods, a lot of ghettos across the world sort of mirror each other. So I'm sure everyone can find a piece of themselves or a piece of their families or a piece of their communities in this. And this book in particular deals with a son who loses his mom. And they sort of had this conversation across time. Um, Kali is still living and Key is dead. But we have these kind of moments of reckoning. And so, yeah, I want to read from Key's perspective, the mom. And this takes place in the 1980s. A lot of Kali's story takes place in the early 2000s. I'm an early 2000 baby. And yeah, and I think toward the end, we start to get toward more present times. And so, yeah, without further ado, the killing fields. Mama would tell me the story of Igbo landing. She was a sad woman growing up, lost all her family to the sun-worn South and its many afflictions. Here in New York, her lover died in the street, but only after he left her. Anyway, Igbo landing is the story of a people who were kidnapped, chained together to be sold in some strange land, and decided to kill their captors instead, throwing them overboard. The stolen, who are now free, walked back the way they came, back through Dunbar Creek and across the freezing Atlantic. It was called a mass suicide. Mama said they were going to march right back to the shores of West Africa, singing to the water spirits. Years later, when I moved out for good, I had already tried to kill myself. I still consider it in the dark, not a creek or shallow in sight. Just like Mama, I'm a sad woman. In the last year of the 80s, I worked in a department store in the city where my boss often confused me with the other black girl who worked there. Keisha, could you make sure the men's tie display is tidy? She said. The beginning of May, already warm and stiff with overcast. Margie was tall for her jacket and sheath dress. Her hair in orange tufts she shoved into a bun. It's Key, I blurted out. On the first floor, dear. It's Key, I said louder. My name, just Key. Isn't that what I said? No, you said Keisha. Not seeing the difference, she said, and walked ahead, the self-importance of a retail manager overseeing a near evangelical dogma. I hurried along beside her. See, Keisha usually closes. This is important to you, she said. Well, it's just, my name. I get mixed up. You understand, don't you? I'm not racist or anything. I'm sure, I said. We were by a women's display, dark and tailored suits over willowy mannequins with their toes pointed. You mix up the two Jewish girls in perfume just the same. You mean Marta and Jenny? Jenna and Marta, I corrected her. Margie's eyebrows, knitted together, had grown bushy and circular because she hadn't plucked them in the break room like she normally did. She considered me, the display section, and a drop shipment from Warren Co. or GH Base. That she would tend to later. Key, you've got it. The ties. I hung out at Strand between shifts, or when I was afraid to go home. Its corner, some cobbled stone blocks away from NYU, was full of punks and addicts, skaters and artists, school kids from small towns upstate or out west. Inside were students with thick-rimmed glasses, girls with dirty blonde hair or dyed hair, young white boys in stone-washed and bright t-shirts. A white girl in a denim-washed top follows me around the store, as disinterested as I am. I picked out what I like and hid in a corner surrounded by bookshelves. I set down my bags and sat for what seemed like hours. On this day, I read a story about a man on his dying mother's wish who sets off to find his father in a far-off town somewhere in Mexico. When he goes, he finds that everyone in the town is dead and has been dead for a long time. He sinks into madness, not knowing whether he's been talking to ghosts or illusions within his own mind. I wondered the same thing as I rode the subway to the last stop in Brooklyn. I have had dreams of meeting people I don't know to exist since I was 14. Actually, I think I've seen ghosts. There was this woman I saw with a young boy, always in front of the strip mall on Pennsylvania Ave in Worthing. She had a scar behind her ear, her nightgown worn at the bottom where it covered her feet. A look of longing had settled across her face, her skin a deep chestnut that cracked at the creases. One day, she looked up for what seemed like the first time ever, across the parking lot, toward the bus stop, at me. The longing returned to something more, something I thought I recognized. I always asked about the woman in the nightgown whenever I remembered to, yet no one seemed to know her. Everyone I asked claimed to have never seen her before, nor did she sound familiar. Dante shook his head the first time I questioned him. You out here all day, I said. You must have seen her. Never. That can't be. Would she owe you money or something? He asked, his voice a treble from deep behind his chest, between his large shoulders. I think I know her from somewhere, I said. It wasn't a lie. Stories get retold in different ways. Nehemiah led his people back to their home, only to find it in ruins. All I had really known was ruin. The estate was a maze. Towers swept the length of the boulevard, each window home to a different story, some other war. Some glowed with a warm light or strung flags along the protected bars. A few were still lined with Christmas decorations. Someone had left them all stranded. It wasn't just me. One day, as I got off the southbound bus at Broadway Junction, I looked for a woman through a cloud of exhaust. There was smoke from a grill, an older person burning chicken skewers by the stop. The strip mall was a line of brick shop fronts and faded blues and pinks and greens, dusty windows under wire frame awnings and blinking neon displays. There was a beauty supply, a liquor store, a choice of quick, greasy food, and a store that sold everything from jewelry to tape players, to pagers, to basketball shoes. Plastic bottles and food wrappers tumbled around the parking lot, caught on the hook of a light wind. I went to the beauty supply, and an electronic buzzing as I opened the door. The woman at the counter smiled, eyed my purse and large shopping bag that I carried. The aisles were short, but crammed with balms and bottles of grease, tubs of pomade, shelves with nail polish and press-ons, walls of lace fronts and packaged hair. A display of floating styrofoam heads draped in wigs, from bobs to long and wavy, colors like auburn and brown and blonde. On the workman's side, the older men who hung out there every day were tuning their cars and talking shit. They'd offer car advice and check under your hood in exchange for a few wild horses. The sun moved through the corridor, aiming down on their dark shoulders and balding heads. A lather of grease from the cars ran into the street, made wheels turn, and water from the hoses slipped into the gutters. Some stories are older than time. Girl, you ain't get no type of shoes to go with this? Genesis shouted from the bathroom of our apartment. She came out barefoot, a leather fur detail over a Tommy halter and tight leather skirt. I wore a Guess denim skirt and a sleeveless fur jacket. You have 100 shoes you can put with that, I told her, right in your closet. You scary as hell. I know you're not worried. My boss don't even know my name. Since I always returned the clothes I stole, usually the day after, there was no reason Margie would notice something missing. You seen Dante around? I saw him by the jewelry spot, I said. I moved about the apartment in my jacket as if I must know how it looked in every room. He say anything? I had gone into the beauty supply before he could see me. You know, that place gotta be a front for something. Wait, you went to the beauty supply and didn't tell me? What, you want me to come get you every time I pick out a wig? Yeah, I would like that. But continue. I saw him at the VRC with his daughter. Genesis shouted across the hall. She was on the balls of her feet, trying to see her shoes in the bathroom mirror. They're way too cute. So you're trying to play house with this man already? Ain't nobody playing, she yelled. And I snorted. I don't like the way he treats the mother of his child, I said. As I searched for the wire hangers we ordered from the dry cleaners. But you know Tiffany. So what? He probably the reason everyone's so quick to call her crazy. I took off the clothes and hung them up before they could even begin to wrinkle. The living room had been taken over by Genesis Salon. During the day, she did hair for most of the girls in the building. She braided designs with her long nails and could wash and set as good as the Dominican girls with mullets. There were hot irons and combs and packets of luscious extensions across the counter just before midnight. When she finished her prep for the next day, I put a tape in the VCR. There were at least 6 movies on it, stitched together in different volumes and varying quality. We settled into our pull-outs and whispered over Cooley High. Genesis fell asleep just as Preach stands over Cochise's grave with a bottle of brandy. I mouthed the words along with him. Don't worry, I'm gonna make it. I can lie and steal too good not to survive. I feel that all the way down to my bones. I dream that there are people who meet by the ocean, who sleep and find themselves near bodies of water. The first time the tide is at my ankles, cold and thick, I yell out, fall backward into the sand, the back of my throat raw from the song of my breath. The brush winds, shaking from a chorus of bush crickets. I had made it across the expressway through a field of wheat and mud, half conscious, smelling of sweat and exhaust, dirt and cuts on my feet. The bay opens up into an infinite black, the Atlantic murky under the wine of the moon. I hear the parkway behind me, the heating plants, the boiler stations, chimneys choking up heavy smoke and flashes of ember. Is someone there? I ask, but my voice is carried out over the water and drowns under the lapping waves. I woke toward the sound, behind a bend, broken trees, over a hedge of rock, and I see them. They are still, all lined across the sand, a couple of feet apart. The harbor is dotted with a couple of dozen people, men, women, young and old, and water to their ankles, all along the sandy border. An older woman walks toward me, the bottom of her tattered nightgown swaying with the tide. Sometimes my mother stared across the room at the wall, the bookcase, or the recliner, her face held together in tight knots. I'd make noise so she'd notice me. She'd come back, tightening her hand on the bottom of the remote. I'd wonder where she went. She'd returned from some faraway world. When she saw me, she smiled, but her eyes were tired. She saw someone who had become soft and defenseless. I wondered if she could see the ocean, hear water in her dreams like I did. In the middle of May, I was combing my hair in the living room and asked Mama to reach the back for me. She held the comb like a cross when I handed it to her and sat behind me on the couch. I asked her why she never had more children. They had to cut me out, she said, along with part of her, a sacrificed flesh. She couldn't go through that again. I was enough for her to worry about. I had no money, no real savings. I dropped out of community college after a year. City college seemed like one big-ass high school, one that cost money that we didn't have. There didn't seem much else on the other side of things. Lord knows I've tried since you, she said. She stopped combing, smoothed grease from my mane along my scalp. You're my only one. I thought about the boy outside the strip mall even more, his mother, who stayed with me like a hangover. I felt a connection to Miss Pat. She could see what I claimed I wanted, and that most days those desires meant nothing. I passed a few shelters on my way to work, look at their corkboards in the lobby, or search the front desk for a number to call for someone who could help the kid, grabbing flyers for coat drives or housing programs. At work, I'd wander the floors, seeing Margie or the other manager tidy a display and help a customer who didn't really need it. That night, I wore what I could haul from work to the basketball game. Gersh Park was crowded from the street all the way to the court. The park even hotter with the street lamps, folk eager to hang around during one of the last games of the tournament. It was mostly players who were college prospects at one point, who either flunked out of school or couldn't afford it. The game was like a graceful chase in a strange wilderness. Folk crowded the bleachers, sat on benches, beach chairs on top of coolers, the hoods of their cars. Lanky boys hung from the gates, whooping for their friends they called their cousins. I like to look at all of us under the half moon, the brown of our skin, the way it held light, the dips of muscles under sleeves, fleshy parts that showed under shirts and tops. Girls younger than me were rubbed down in Vaseline, glowing in a dulled bronze from the park lamps. Boys left their shirts and jackets in their cars or slung over fences, some covered in dull ink and piercings. The heavy smoke from smoldering grills made me tear up. So we did a lap around the court, back out to the street, Genesis popping her gum like fireworks the whole time. Double parked along the street with MPVs and Land Cruisers, a Lexus coupe with the doors open, the frame rattling, Eric B. as president, blaring from the car, the sound of motorbikes like chainsaws barreling down the street, their front wheels pointed up toward the sky like they could take off into the falling dust. There were police vans across the park, along the boulevard. White boys in their cruisers were lined up like their own self-fashioned barricade. They spoke to each other. Sometimes their Black or Hispanic partner, some guy who was at the top of his class in junior college. Some wore t-shirts, black with the words Killing Fields, in bold white across the front. That was what they called this place. It was a badge they wore, ironically, while the home of their days off in Hempstead or Howard Beach, maybe in the dim light of their favorite bar or while cleaning out their garage. They survived. I guess we survived too. I didn't feel much pride from it. And the news ran with the moniker too. I imagined this place 100 years ago, a field of blood, acres of sun-washed stalks, sprayed red at the tips, not the stretch of train yards, empty lots, and walk-ups. A street behind the old theater on Elton sat below sea level, an entire city block of gutted houses and abandoned cars on swampland. Women who lived there hung laundry from wires, from fence posts, from trees. There was the mob, who'd send a guy over here from Bay Ridge or Bensonhurst or whatever to dump a body near the edge of the marsh-like fields, to be pulled into the ocean by the tide. Steps from where I'd wake up at night, at the crest of the bay, there were shopping carts and tents, the hard sand threaded with bottle tops and needles. Who knew how many dead were beneath that water? And I'll stop there. Thank you.